This is the video that will help you improve your fantasy team, especially now that the bye weeks are here. Look, plain and simple, if you're not trading, you're not trying in fantasy. The goal is to improve your team, whether you're the best, #1 overall in your league, or the worst. So in this video, we'll discuss 5 running backs that you should be targeting in trades to do exactly that, improve your team. And I'll start with Tyjae Spears, who was actually in this video featured all the way back after week 1 when everybody was down on him and saying, oh, Zach Moss is the starter, oh, Tyjae Spears not seeing work. Everybody, calm down. It was just 1 week. Yeah, the early season usage wasn't good, but Brown is too talented of a player and had too much training camp hype to just not be involved in the offense. And oh boy, ever since week 1, he's been involved in the offense. You can see here, week 2, he gets 18% of the snaps. Week 3, 23%. So the usage is slowly increasing. Week 4, a season high 42% of the snaps, leads the backfield with 52% of the rush attempts, one more than Zach Moss, and even sees his most routes run 33%. His usage in this game overall was great, and it led to a strong fantasy day. 15 carries, he gets 80 yards. Overall, he totals 92 yards, sees a couple of touchdowns, and the key thing on those touchdowns, he got the goal line usage. He scored from 1 yard out and 3 yards out. That is a fantastic role for Tyjae Spears. Now, all offseason, we heard that this was going to be a 1A, 1B backfield with Zach Moss, who signed for, a decent contract, nothing crazy coming over from the Colts, and the second-year player, Tyjae Spears. And maybe that's what we're seeing. That's exactly what we saw this past weekend. Now, I don't think this Tyjae Spears usage means that he's now the #1 running back on the team. No, Zach Moss was still involved. I think it's going to be now a split backfield moving forward. And that's what your expectations should be trading for him. This is a guy who could see 12 to 15 touches a week and a lot more if something happens to Zach Moss in a quality offense with the Bengals right now looking good. Looking good from a fantasy perspective since they got T. Higgins back, maybe not in real life record-wise. But the thing I was really encouraged with was the usage that we were seeing out of him. We were getting some outside zone runs, which are kind of the thing we expect. This is a guy who has a lot of speed. You can see right here, 4.43 speed is 89th percentile according to Player Profiler. So we know he can have those outside runs, but he also had a big 20-yard run where he ran up the middle, one cut back in the hole to the second unit, and then he ends up going for 20 yards. That was an impressive run, running between the tackles and to the outside. That's a good mixture for Tyjae Spears. Because the knock on Brown last year was, oh, he only had a couple of big screen receptions. He didn't do anything on the ground, which was true, but it was a small sample. So it's nice to see as he's getting more touches this year in year 2 behind maybe an improved offensive line. They spent that first-round pick on a tackle, Amarius Mims, a big run blocker. Well, maybe now we're going to start to see some more efficient running like we saw this past week when Tyjae Spears went out there and had 15 carries for 80 yards. The guy went out there and ended up averaging 6 yards per carry. And here's exactly that run that I was talking about. This is via NFL Pro. We can see Tyjae Spears in the backfield. He goes up the middle, one cut, and then he extends to the second level, and that's where his speed and burst comes into play. That's something that you didn't really see last year. Maybe vision was a concern, or more so just going one way to the outside on these outside handoffs and not really cutting back. We saw it right there all coming together, and that happened a couple of times in week 4. And look at this. Tyjae Spears, who wasn't an efficient runner last year, again, it's a small sample size this year, but he leads the NFL with 7.3 true yards per carry, and he currently leads the NFL his juke rate. So this is his broken tackle rate according to Player Profiler, #1 in the NFL. The dude's breaking tackles, and he's highly efficient through 4 games. Now, whether his offensive line has been good or not is debatable, but the fact is he's just not seeing a lot of stack boxes right now. Tyjae Spears' light carry front, meaning just soft boxes he's running into, is the 4th highest in the NFL. And I don't really think this is going to change when you have a team that has guys like, let's pull it up here, Jamar Chase, who's scoring deep touchdowns each of the last 2 weeks, 3 of them total. And T. Higgins is back, looking fantastic in week 4, the best he probably has looked in a year to a year and a half in that week 4 performance. When these guys are out there on the outside, yeah, the defense has to focus their attention there with Joe Burrow at quarterback, not put an extra man or 2 in the box. You're going to continue to see these soft boxes for both Zach Moss and Tyjae Spears. Now, the upcoming matchup against the Ravens isn't the greatest, but then he gets a nice matchup against the Giants and Eagles coming up. And honestly, I'm not really concerned about the Ravens, the Browns, and you could heck even say maybe the Raiders matchup that much, because these soft boxes that we just mentioned, they're going to lead to efficient running lanes for Tyjae Spears, and he could also get there in the receiving game. He's somebody I'm trying to trade for even after he just had a big performance. If you have to pay a little bit more, I'm fine with that. And I'm also fine with buying right now Joe Mixon, who maybe you don't have to buy him low. Maybe people won't sell him completely low, but you're not paying top dollar because the guy hasn't played in a couple of weeks. But here's the thing. He almost played this past week. He's missed the last 2 games with an ankle injury. He ended up missing the game or leaving the game early in week 2, but he was seen participating in practice on Friday. That was the first time he practiced in a couple of weeks, and he almost played in the game on Sunday in week 4, but he didn't. But the team desperately needs him. Since he went down in week 1, the Texans ranked dead last in rushing efficiency, behind the Raiders, who have a terrible run game with Alexander Mattison and Zamir White. Plain and simple, the team needs more help because guys like Cam Akers, even though he's had some tough matchups against like the Vikings in week 3, either way, he's not getting it done. But now Mixon is trending to play at home as a 1-point favorite, so it's basically a coin flip in which should be a great game in the AFC against the Bills. And the Bills, if you don't remember, they just gave up this performance to Derrick Henry. 24 carries, 199 rushing yards, over 200 total yards, multiple touchdowns. Now, I'm not expecting this, of course. This is a different offense. This team wanted to get up and play ahead. Derrick Henry's a different type of running back from Joe Mixon. But it's just to say that the Bills, their defense has been good this year, but they're playing with a lot of backups, and the Ravens exposed them for that, especially at the linebacker position. Now, if I could take you back to week 1, according to Fantasy Life here, you can see that Joe Mixon in that week 1 contest, I mean, he had an elite role. And you might forget this because he hasn't played in a little while. 71% of the snaps, saw 79% of the overall carries. Now, that's also factoring in CJ Stroud and some running back rush attempts. If you look at just the backfield carries in week 1, only Joe Mixon and Dameon Pierce saw carries, and Mixon saw 91% of them. And he turned that elite usage into a big day. Now, it was a beneficial matchup against the Colts. Other teams like the Packers have since ran all over them, but 33 total touches, man, they put in a workhorse usage. Over 170, almost 180 total yards for Joe Mixon. He scores a touchdown. He goes for 30 fantasy points, but then he came out in week 2 where he was also seeing good usage before getting injured. Played 48% of the snaps, 41% of the backfield carries. He was on his way to another great day before injuring the ankle, but he came out in week 2 and he got hurt. And since then, I think the value has gone down or maybe stayed steady on Mixon since that big week 1 performance. People aren't viewing him the same as what that game was for him. And I don't really think they're going to ease him back in. The fact that he practiced on Friday, he'll have a whole nother week to practice right now. And just look at the competition. Dameon Pierce hasn't been playing, and in week 1, again, he only saw 9% of the carries. And it's not like Cam Akers, who had a nice preseason, had a nice camp, looked like he could be the clear RB2. It's not like he's done anything great. He's averaged 11.5 opportunities per game these last 2 weeks. Yes, there was a tough matchup in there, but overall, he's done nothing to lead you to believe like, oh, they're going to ease Mixon back in. They can give him only 40 or 50 or 60% of the opportunities because Akers has been so good. No, I don't think that's going to be the case. So expect Mixon to return to his full workload in week 5, and he's playing in a top 10 offense. The Texans right now have the number 8 overall offense behind a fine offensive line, and that's all you need. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say the Texans have a top 10 offensive line. I think they're probably middle of the pack. If anything, maybe a little bit below that, like around the 18th, 19th overall offensive line. But for fantasy running backs, that's really just all you need. Just don't be disastrous. Because like we mentioned earlier with the soft boxes, when you're facing a team, and in this upcoming week, it'll be the Bills, that has to focus on Nico Collins, maybe a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL right now, probably the number 1 or number 2 or number 3 fantasy wide receiver. When you're facing him and then Stephon Diggs, your attention has to go there. You're not going to care as much or put as much focus on stopping the run and putting an extra man in the box, because if you do that, you're going to leave one-on-ones for Steph Diggs, for Nico, and maybe for Tank Dell if he comes back. So in my opinion, you should be trading for Joe Mixon before week 5 begins. Now, who should you trade him for is the question. Well, I've built the tool that can help you show exactly who you should be trading for. It's my rest of season rankings, the trade tool, whatever you want to call it right here. It just ranks the rest of season players at every single position, so you know exactly where their value is compared to somebody else. This is last week's tool. I will be sending later today to 20,000 people who have access to this tool. I'll send them that tool. I'll send them some other tools as well. Now, you might be wondering, well, how do I get access to that? Well, it's just in the fantasy blueprint. It's just one of the tools in there. I have waiver wire tiers and rankings and projections for each week, game by game matchup notes for every single player, their key matchups that you need to know. And how do you get it? Well, it's linked down below. You follow these 2 simple steps right here. It's as simple as that. You sign up through one of our partners. And here's the thing: when you sign up, you click get access. You can sign up either through Underdog here, or you can sign up through Better. And if you sign up through one of our partners, it becomes risk-free. This right here, it's risk-free when you sign up through one of our partners. Now, what does that mean? Well, it is a one-time payment of just $10 to have access for the entire year, every single week. And if you don't make your fantasy playoffs when you sign up through a partner, it's risk-free, meaning I give you that $10 right back. So if you want to get access to my fantasy blueprint and all the tools to help you smack around your league mates, your competition, just scan the QR code that's on the screen right now, or you can click the link in the description below to get access. Again, you'll smack around your competition. Okay, next up, I want to talk about Jonathan Brooks. And we talked about him last week as somebody who is a rising player that you should buy before he comes back from his injury, because the Panthers offense looks so good in week 3 with Andy Dalton. And believe it or not, his price has likely gotten even cheaper right now because of 2 reasons. First off, Chuba Hubbard for the second straight game looked great. He saw a season high 74% of the snaps, 67% of the backfield carries, and he turned this strong usage into another big day. And another nice matchup against the Bengals' soft run defense, which you have to start kind of focusing on each week. They stink really bad, and they just had another injury to Trey Hendrickson. I don't know how bad that'll be on their defensive line, but Chuba Hubbard goes for 18 carries, 4 receptions, so over 20 touches, over 100 total yards, finds the end zone again, back-to-back weeks of being a top 10 running back. This week, I believe he was a borderline top 5 running back, and he's been looking really good. So that's the first reason. Chuba Hubbard has played well enough to maybe now force a split backfield for a couple of weeks, if not the rest of the season with Brooks. But the second reason why Brooks is going to become cheaper for you is this right here. The Panthers don't plan to activate Jonathan Brooks from the PUP list this week, so he's not going to return in week 5. And look, here's the deal. That's not ideal. That's not great. We were hoping for a week 5 return. That's when he's eligible to return, but it's not the end of the day. This is not like a new injury, and that's the reason why he's not returning. He didn't re-injure himself. If I had to guess, I think they're just bringing him back slow because the last 2 weeks the offense has looked great. The offensive line has been great, and Chuba Hubbard's doing just fine. So there's no need to rush back Jonathan Brooks to be a playmaker and contributor, because right now Xavier Legette just popped off. Deontay Johnson looks like one of the best receivers in the NFL, and Chuba Hubbard is looking great since Andy Dalton took over. I wouldn't be concerned about the injury. I think they're just taking their time with him because he's just a rookie, a second-round pick that they traded 2 picks to get. So they have a lot of investment here. And as my friend Sports MD Analysis on Twitter points pointed out, this was before the injury news came out, so this dude is fantastic. Follow him. Jonathan Brooks of the Panthers. I lean a week 5 to week 7 target as his return. So it's always kind of been that he could have come back in week 6 or week 7, then likely a 4-week ramp up. So I think that we're probably going to get him back, hopefully in week 6. And if that's the case, maybe it takes him week 6, week 7, a little bit of week 8 to get ramped up. And from week 9 on, you're getting a guy heading into the playoffs who can be a league winner. That's the type of prospect this dude is. And that's what you have to keep in mind here. You're not paying for a guy to be a week in and week out 20 touch guy the moment he comes back. You have to keep that in mind. Like, you can probably get Rico Dowdle right now in a trade for Jonathan Brooks after Dowdle scored and had like 12 touches on Thursday Night Football last week. I think you can probably make that trade happen. Maybe a similar level trade. Rashad White. These are the deals I would be doing to go get Jonathan Brooks right now. And I would also be trying to trade for Josh Jacobs because the sentiment is extremely low right now because so far this season, if we pull up his game logs on Player Profiler, he hasn't had a top 20 performance. 25th, 23rd, 49th was a really bad game. And this past week, he had 11.8 points. He was somewhere around like the RB 30. And here's the other thing, hasn't scored a touchdown. The total touchdowns column is 0. So the sentiment is low on this guy who you might have spent a 3rd or a 4th round pick. Hopefully you didn't spend that high of a pick, but you probably did. And he hasn't finished as a top 20 guy, hasn't found the end zone. What gives? Well, I'll just pull up these box scores one more time just to show you that he's playing well. Like 104 yards in week 1 on a bad field to start the season against the Eagles in his first ever game with the Packers. 151 yards a week after that when everybody in the stadium on the Colts knew that he was running the ball and he was still able to. Then yes, he has a bad game the following week. And in that game, we saw his backup running back Emmanuel Sanders see 14 touches, basically split the backfield, and that was a concern. That's the second reason why people are down on him, because Emmanuel Sanders. I don't know why I keep saying Emmanuel Sanders. The man's name is Emmanuel Wilson, but I keep just saying Emmanuel Sanders. It's like the only other Emmanuel I've ever said on these airways. But you can see Jacobs coming off of this week, though. He had a decent week. Like, I don't really know why people are too concerned. It was a brutal matchup against Minnesota. He gets you 12 fantasy points, which we already told you coming into the week. We talked about it on Yahoo, that this was the sketchy spot of the week. Amongst every single player in fantasy football, the most sketchy spot was Josh Jacobs against this Vikings defense, and he gets you 12 points. He goes out there in a game where the Packers are down by 28 in the first half. He still gets 13 touches, 51 yards, 27 receiving yards, so he puts up over 70 total yards. And the big thing here, catches 4 balls. That's important. That's important because with Malik Willis, a mobile quarterback the last 2 weeks, Jacobs only had 1 total target and 1 total catch through 2 games. He now is unlocked in the receiving game a little bit with Jordan Love back. And yes, the Packers were trailing big in that game, so they had to throw more, opening up more check down opportunities for Jacobs. But even in week 1, you saw him see 3 targets with Jordan Love back there. And again, he only had 1 total target the last 2 weeks with Malik Willis. As I mentioned, Emmanuel Wilson, not Sanders, is the other running back in this backfield. And this past week, he even played 40% of the snaps. I think he's a nice add. We talked about him in the waiver wire video as a guy who can give you some spike week production like he did in week 3 where he scored 16 fantasy points. But there's no doubt about it, this is still the Josh Jacobs backfield. He's commanding the snaps just like he did this past week. Because Jacobs just played 61% of the snaps. Now, yeah, he saw 50% of the backfield carries, but that's including quarterback runs, some Jaden Reed runs. Actually, compared to Emmanuel Wilson, he was still out there seeing over 55, I think over 60. It was overall 64% of the backfield opportunities. And in that game, he had 13 touches, averaged 6 yards per touch. Like, the efficiency was there in a tough matchup. The usage got better than the week before, but the sentiment is low because he didn't score a touchdown again in a tough matchup where they were down by 28. I'm looking at this as you have Matt LaFleur, who is a top 3 to 4 play caller, if not the best play caller right now in the NFL through the first 4 games of the season. And the place that he specializes is the run game. The Packers offense with their tight ends, with their play action, with their running backs is built off the run game. So like the focus of their offense should be Josh Jacobs. And I think we're going to see that more moving forward because on the season, everything looks fine. Like he's averaging basically 5 yards per touch. He's still breaking tackles. He has the 11th most broken tackles in the NFL. His breakaway runs are fine. He has 4 breakaway runs this season. That's number 2 in the NFL. So like everything in terms of how he's playing right now is completely fine. Jacobs looks fine. If he would have scored a touchdown in just one of those contests and he had a touchdown called back this season, nobody's concerned at all, in my opinion. I think right now is the perfect time to buy low. Next up is Bijan Robinson, who you might be saying, oh, nobody's going to want to trade for Bijan Robinson. But trust me, based on the messages I'm getting in the comments right now, a lot of people are frustrated with Bijan, and it makes sense based off his week 4 usage alone. Here's exactly his usage. He played 61% of the snaps, saw just 47, not even the majority of the rush attempts in this game, compared to just week 3, where he was seeing his normal usage, 82% of the snaps, over 60% of the rush attempts, right? Everything kind of reduced this week, including his split with his backfield competitor, Tyler Algier, who goes out, scores 10 fantasy points. On just 8 carries, has 60 yards, adds 20 yards throughout the air. Now, we just mentioned recently in the running back waiver wire video that released earlier this week, check it out if you haven't already, that Algier is a great pickup because not only can he have these weeks for you where he's a flex option and get you 10 points, which are valuable during the bye weeks that are now here, well, also Tyler Algier, if anything was to happen to Bijan Robinson, has proven in the past that he could be a workhorse running back like he did his rookie year when he went for over 1,000 yards. But let's not get it twisted by any means. Like, Algier is not going to consistently be a flex option getting 10 plus points for you. It might happen a couple of weeks because this is still Bijan Robinson's backfield. And if you've watched the film at all, look, here's the thing. If you've watched the film at all, just go to NFL Pro, buy a membership. I don't even care if you do or not. I'm not affiliated, but if you just pay like $10 or whatever it is a month, you can watch all the carries from Bijan Robinson and all the touches. He still looks good. There's nothing wrong with him. He's not like washed, and that makes sense. He's only in his second year. What the real issue for Bijan in this game was his shoulder injury. He picked up a shoulder injury in practice on Thursday. It kept him limited in practice on Thursday. He was able to practice on Friday and ultimately play in the game in week 4, but that is definitely, in my opinion, why he was limited, because again, 61% of the snaps. It was a 20% drop off from the week before. Nearly a 20% drop off in his rush attempts. Tyler Algier, who is a capable backup running back, the organization looked at him and said, yeah, we'll just give you a couple more carries. We'll give you some more work. You're doing good in this game, and Bijan's dealing with an injury. Why not? And it's not like Bijan is playing completely terrible. Heading into this week, he had 3 top 20 performances. Now, of course, you spent the top 5 overall pick on him, so you want these to be top 10 performances, but 16 points on 111 total yards, 16 points on 122 total yards. He finds the end zone a week after that. It's not like he's the reason why you're losing your weekly matchups, but again, all I'm seeing right now is panic on Twitter, panic in the comment sections, panic in my emails. Everything right now is concerned around Bijan Robinson. And my easy answer is go to those people and try and send them a buy low offer, because right now, I don't know if you know, the entire NFL is injured. All the first and second and third round picks are injured or not performing. So Bijan just being out there is good enough at this point, and he's producing well. And not to mention, if you watch the game, this is the play right here. I don't want to get copyrighted strike by the NFL these days, but Bijan Robinson had a touchdown in this game. It was a receiving touchdown of about 16 yards, and it ended up getting called back by a penalty, and the penalty was basically ticky-tack. So if that holds up, well, now Bijan Robinson has another 8 points in the day, another touchdown on the season, and nobody is panicked at all about him. So now there's this narrative that maybe Bijan isn't a tier 1 player. Maybe he's a tier 2 or tier 3 player that people overpaid for a first round pick. That's what I'm seeing in some Twitter threads right now. It's crazy. Even though he played injured in week 4 and didn't see his normal role, he still ranks 3rd in the NFL in running back snap share, 83%, 7th in opportunity share, seeing 75% of his backfield opportunities. He's still a clear workhorse running back, and heading into this week, he's going to face the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a Buccaneers team that has given up over 100 yards this year to Brian Robinson, a Buccaneers team that just as recent as last week to Saquon Barkley. Barkley seeing just 12 touches, put up 116 total yards. I think Bijan's going to be just fine. Buy low if you can before Thursday Night Football. And even if Thursday Night Football and that game is already over, the sentiment still remains the same, assuming Bijan doesn't explode in that one, but I think he might. Now, this next running back, I think you should buy high on. It's not always buy low. Sometimes you have to pay up because I think the consistency that he's producing with is going to continue. But before we get there, 67% of you are still not subscribed to this YouTube channel. Hey, we made it to that part. The gentleman's agreement. The gentleman's agreement is you made it this far. You probably find the video interesting, helpful, entertaining, whatever it might be. So in exchange, you just hit the subscribe button. It takes 2 seconds. It really helps this channel grow. My goal is to get that number closer to 55 to 50% by the end of 2024. So thank you so much. Gentleman's agreement. Hit that subscribe button. Now, the player I believe you should be buying high on is this guy right here, and it's Kenneth Walker, who in week 1, he had a dominant role. Remember all the way back in week 1, Kenneth Walker comes out, plays 67% of the snaps, sees 63% of the rush attempts. He turns this great usage into a 20-plus point fantasy day, over 100 yards, scores a touchdown in a tough matchup, not the easiest matchup against the Broncos. He ends up dominating. Walker looks great per usual, but then he goes down with an injury, a core muscle injury, and he misses the next 2 weeks. But then Walker returned in week 4 in a brutal matchup against the Lions. You might think, oh, Zach Charbonnet might see some of the work. No. I mean, Charbonnet sees the work, but I thought maybe you see majority of the touches for Charbonnet still as Walker gets back up to health. Not the case. You see right here, Kenneth Walker sees 53 snaps to just 38 for Zach Charbonnet, and the overall touches dominates them. 12 carries to just 2 for Charbonnet. They each see 5 targets in this game. And on this usage, Kenneth Walker ends the week as the running back 2, putting up 3 total touchdowns, putting up over 100 total yards, averaging nearly 6.5 yards per carry, 12 carries, 80 yards against a great Lions defense. Now, he benefited from falling behind early. That allowed him to get those 4 catches for 36 yards, run into a couple of soft boxes, but he had a couple of impressive plays. You probably saw them on social media, falling back, getting back up. It looked incredible. And then the big thing was the 3 touchdowns. Like, you have DK Metcalf tackle at the 1-yard line. A couple times they got down to the 1-yard line. Jake Bobo as well, I believe. And then you just run it in with Kenneth Walker. Look, that's not always going to be the case that Kenneth Walker's just seeing a ton of 1-yard touchdowns and the wide receivers get unlucky. But the thing is, he produced in the toughest matchup he'll have all year. And he immediately came back and saw 12 carries to just 2 for Charbonnet. He closed the door on any speculation that maybe Charbonnet will be involved a couple weeks until Kenneth Walker is back and healthy. No, Kenneth Walker is back and healthy based on his 16 touches, his 17 opportunities, his over 100 yards in the toughest matchup that he'll see all year. You might be saying nobody's going to trade Kenneth Walker, and probably if you have him, you shouldn't trade him at this point, because I'm here to tell you that he's a top 10 running back the rest of the season. After this performance, you're going to have to pay a pretty penny for him, so maybe you don't want to pay all the way up high. Maybe wait 1 week if he has an average to mediocre week and then trade for him. I just want to put it on your radar that Kenneth Walker is back. This Seattle offense is great, and the dude is seeing targets. 5 targets. Yes, I know they got behind, but he also saw targets in week 1. 4 receptions, 36 yards. This was never a part of his game. The offense looks great. It was moving the ball downfield with ease yesterday against a solid Detroit Lions defense, and this is a guy that you want to be targeting right now in trades somehow or another if you can get it done. I mean, look at this. According to NFL Pro, the Lions had the second best run defense in the NFL entering the week. They were only allowing 3.6 rushing yards per contest. Only the Ravens were better at 3 yards per contest, and you get Kenneth Walker coming in here and averaging 6.5, looking dominant off an injury. I do think after week 1, I thought he was a top 10 running back. The injuries added some speculation. Now I think he's a top 10 running back the rest of the season once again. And when you look at the schedule, things open up. The Detroit Lions matchup, that's now over. Great matchup at home against the Giants. Matchup against the 49ers. You can run on the 49ers if the game stays close at home. Matchup against the Falcons. We know you can run on the Falcons. We just saw it this past week. Matchup against the Bills. We just saw Derrick Henry go for over 200 yards. Matchup against the Rams. Everybody's running on the Rams right now. Like the schedule. That's the reason why I think he's a nice buy high. The schedule. And you can keep scrolling down his schedule. It gets good. It's great. The next player I want to talk about is Jordan Mason, who right now it might be a little bit more difficult to get him because we had recent news that Christian McCaffrey is expected back at least by early November, that there was this news that he was going to come back. And then we got news as of yesterday that McCaffrey now has Achilles tendonitis in both of his legs, and people got concerned. But believe it or not, if we go over to Sports MD Analysis on Twitter right here, again, a great follow, bilateral Achilles tendonitis in both of his legs, the timeline is unchanged. It would be the same as if he just had it in one leg, apparently, which sounds pretty crazy. On average, it's still a 4 to 6 week recovery. And as always, the re-injury risk is already very high. So nothing really changes. Now, the news and the sentiment of him having it in both legs sounds scary, but the recovery time is still 4 to 6 weeks, which it was if it was just in one of his legs. Look, it basically seems right now like by the day you're getting a situation where McCaffrey's news is changing. So right now, maybe the sentiment is low. As of yesterday, the sentiment was high. Maybe tomorrow it'll be even better for McCaffrey. Whatever the news is on McCaffrey, if it starts to trend like he's going to come back in a few weeks, I think you can probably start to get some buy low situations for Jordan Mason. Now, coming off of his big week 4 might not be the week to do so, but this is a guy you want to acquire. I know he just had over 150 yards, 160 total yards, 27 fantasy points. The guy who has him in their league, they probably got him on the waivers, a late round draft pick. They don't want to give him away for nothing. But I want to speak to specifically Christian McCaffrey owners. Get that guy off of your team. I think at the best case scenario, he's coming back in 4 to 6 weeks and being limited, splitting the backfield one with Jordan Mason. I think Jordan Mason will be the lead back on this 49ers team, even when McCaffrey comes back until the postseason. And you might be saying that, Sal, that's crazy. No, the re-injury risk is extremely high for McCaffrey. They're not going to risk the 28-year-old tearing his Achilles and then his career being over. They're going to follow the doctor's instructions and give him limited touches in the regular season games that don't matter as much, especially since Jordan Mason has been so good. He's been so dominant. He's been a top 5 running back in the NFL this season on top 5 running back usage. That is great for fantasy. So if there's any way you can deal McCaffrey and somebody else, throw in a Cortland Sutton, throw in somebody else for Jordan Mason, I'd be doing that right now. And I'd also be looking to buy low in some situations as he enters his bye week on Tyjae Spears, who entered last week, finally healthy, finally fully back from an injury that limited him last week when he returned, and he saw good usage. Now, as expected, it was still Tony Pollard leading this backfield playing 39 snaps, but the split got a little bit closer here. Tyjae Spears plays 27 snaps. Tyjae Spears, if you scroll over, on his 27 snaps, 15 carries, 2 targets, 17 opportunities on his 27 snaps compared to 20 opportunities on Tony Pollard's snaps. Now, overall, Tyjae Spears wasn't efficient. This was a game where Miami's run defense was good, has been good all year. They held basically both running backs down. I think Tony Pollard had a little bit more efficient day because he had a 40-yard run. You take that away, and there really wasn't much yards per carry. But you can see in this game, 17 opportunities is great. Leads to 12 fantasy points. He finds the end zone. He's now going into the bye week, and I think the bye week is important specifically for Tyjae Spears because he's been dealing with an injury, a nagging injury. This was the first game that I think he started to get ramped back up, and I don't even know then, if you watch the game, if he was really fully back to himself. So if you can buy low on him as he enters the bye week, maybe the league manager in your league really needs a win this week. They can't take the 0 on the bench from Tyjae Spears. If you can go out there and swap a Cortland Sutton for him 1-for-1, swap somebody else, I think that Tyjae Spears is a top 100 player the rest of the season, and he has the burst, the efficiency per touch. Once he's healthy, the bye week will help with that. In my opinion, to be a league winner down the stretch for what looks like maybe an offense that is starting to get some things together, although not a lot in Tennessee. So these have been the running backs that you should be trading for. Now, when the wide receiver video pops up later this week, I'll post it right here. But for now, if you haven't already, check out the running back and the wide receiver waiver ads. Some of those guys are still available on your waiver wires right now, and they shouldn't be. So check out those videos. Gentlemen's agreement, hit the subscribe button before you go, and I'll see you beautiful people in the next one.